All right, what is up? Welcome in. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, GC Live, brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com. 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Like we always tell you, if you're in the market for a new home, all you got to do is hit up our guy Clint, and he's going to walk you through the entire mortgage process, let you know what options you have, let you know what you can afford, and have a real honest conversation with you about what all that looks like. Plus, if you're a Gamecock fan, like I'm sure all of you are, he's going to talk some ball with you too. So hit up Clint, again, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Chris, I feel like we have probably been talking about summer official visits since, when did this start? Like February?
Yeah.
Really, guys started setting visits, and it's kind of this weird thing where guys are setting visits, and you report on it because they're setting visits, and people want to hear about it. But then it's so fluid. Guys cancel visits, guys move visits, guys commit before the visits even happen. And so now here we are, day of, it's a Friday. We're going to count it as June. We're going to count it as the June official visit season, even though from a literal standpoint, we're still in May. But Gamecocks kicked this thing off with 8 official visitors. That's the final number, unless there's some very, very, very late tweak. The expectation is 8 guys on campus this weekend. And in today's show, we're going to go through all 8.
Yep. And just to set the table, only one is a current commitment for South Carolina. And that means 7 targets, Wes. And the fascinating thing, I think, about this weekend, and this will probably hold true, this, of course, is one of really 3 big official visit weekends, at least for the summer, right? Probably see some guys in season that are going to make some official visits, things like that. But for now, this summer, big official visit weekend, this weekend, next weekend, and the weekend of June 20th. You know, I'm bad with dates, Wes. Everybody knows that. But the first of 3. And the interesting thing is you've got different, I think, levels to all of these guys. Obviously, Anthony Baxter, Gamecock offensive lineman commitment. He's only committed guy this weekend. The others kind of range from guys that, South Carolina's maybe been down the road for a little while longer, maybe in better shape with some than others. But you have, I think, for the most part, Wes, some pretty big-time recruiting battles within the structure of all these. And so this is going to be a key weekend for South Carolina to, I think, make some big strides and get themselves in better position for guys as the summer progresses and as the season gets closer.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, man, let's start with, I would say, no matter where you look, probably the highest rated guy on the weekend. Still a little bit of this is we've talked about this before with Carter Meadows, 5-star edge, at least according to On3. There's a little bit of disagreement on just how highly you should have him ranked. On3 and 24/7 both have him actually incredibly high, with him topping out 6th in the country, but On3, 34th in the country in 24/7 Sports, 88th on ESPN, and then 240 in Rivals. So our own Rivals. So that's actually a pretty wide range there for a guy that On3 is as high on as they are. However, still in that 4-star to 5-star category on all the services, and then you just add them all up, put them in the algorithm, and it spits out number 36 overall prospect in the country, number 6 edge, and the consensus number 1 prospect in the DC area. Chris, is this possibly it's already the Sterling Lucas effect in play just for Carolina to be essentially in that Final Four with the 4 official visits?
That's right.
Could it be the Sterling Lucas effect in terms of the Gamecocks landing this On3 5-star?
Well, I won't bury the lead, so time will tell. I don't think this is a guy that you point to and start predicting South Carolina or say, hey, this is a guy that I think they will land. But this is a guy, Wes, that they could land, right? So that's obviously a key distinction. But with Meadows, I go back to maybe a few months ago, and he just kind of pops up as like you fit the profile, right? He's a big time, athletic, productive, high upside edge defender from the DMV area. And when you hear that, you go, oh, well, Sterling Lucas is probably trying to recruit him, right? But it kind of came out of nowhere with him just saying, hey, yeah, I really like South Carolina. They're one of my top schools. I'm going to go visit there. I'm going to go take an official visit there. And it was kind of just boom, all out on the table at once. Whereas I think I made this distinction before. You had a guy like Dylan Stewart, who, of course, ultimately signed with South Carolina and is thriving in Columbia, where I think there was a little bit of a longer runway. And you just knew, like, he had been on campus. We watched him work out at a camp a couple years ago, Wes. You knew he was going to be on the radar. And it was just about beating out all these other blue blood schools for his services. Meadows is a little bit different in that, I'm sure Lucas was working behind the scenes, but boom, it just kind of all comes out at once. I'm interested. One of my top schools taking a visit there. So he was on campus for the spring game already, liked what he saw enough to go ahead and follow through with scheduling an official visit. And not surprisingly, the competition is big here. You've got Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, a bunch of Big Ten schools, obviously, but a bunch of programs that always recruit well and have obviously found a lot of success as of late being playoff teams. So big time competition here. Gamecocks are an SEC outlier. They are a Southeast outlier for Carter Meadows. And you're going to have to survive, frankly, the rest of the summer. But an opportunity here to you get the first visit. Can you set the bar here to where Carter Meadows continues to come back in his mind to South Carolina?
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think this is your classic edge target. You could say in this scheme, but really just in general at this point, like everybody is looking for guys who have that kind of 6'5", 6'6" frame, basketball background. If you quickly look at his huddle, you'll see basketball highlights pop up. You'll see this is a guy who just has that twitch you're looking for, has that build you're looking for. And, I think, every position is like this to an extent in terms of evaluation. Every position is one where, you're looking for certain measurables. But to me, man, edge is definitely a traitsy position. Like that's a spot where, can you succeed there with, less than desirable measurables? Certain guys can. You have those kind of like find a way guys, I think. But if I'm evaluating, if I'm putting my livelihood on a guy, and if I have a choice, like player A, player B, give me the ones with the traits. And people may be saying, well, yeah, you'll take the traits everywhere. That's not necessarily true. Like I think there are certain spots like, do I love a linebacker with traits? Yeah, of course. But they got to be able to diagnose. They've got to be tough. They've got to be physical. Do I love a quarterback with traits? Yes, but they have to be able to read the defense. They have to be accurate. There's 1,000 things I would put in front of physical traits for a QB. We even talk about this with wide receivers. Traits are great, but do you have ball skills? Can you catch the football? And maybe you count those in traits too, but I'm more talking about just the physical measurables and the burst if you're in defensive end, the long arms, those type of things. And this kid just kind of has it.
Yeah, he does. Certainly fits that mold. With the basketball background, the length, like the athleticism, he checks so many of those boxes. And we know from what Sterling Lucas has done in Columbia West is he's got a good recruiting track record, but he's also done a really good job of developing guys and getting them ready. Whether it's, some people may not want to give credit for, Dylan Stewart, anybody could develop him. We kind of tend to go there. Anybody could coach that guy. But I think we were all surprised by just how ready Dylan Stewart looked, right? And he's talked highly of Sterling Lucas, and Kyle Kennard comes in from a guy who had a solid career to winning the award for the best player in college football. right? Not the best guy at his position, the best defensive player in college football. And even some of the other just like depth pieces that he's helped develop and really maximize. So you start to get excited if you're a South Carolina fan thinking about the possibility of what can Sterling Lucas do with another guy who's got tons of athletic tools like Carter Meadows. So, this one, Wes, for me falls into that category of like, yeah, South Carolina's in the game. Like there's little dispute, right? This is not the time of year where you're getting like charity official visits, token official visits. These are serious things. And for the most part, if you're getting a guy on campus for an official, you've got a legitimate shot. I think there are levels even to that. I think Carter Meadows is someone where South Carolina firmly has his attention. But, I mean, you heard the schools I just mentioned out of the Big Ten. They're making their best effort too. And so we'll have to see how this thing shakes out. Hard to predict how it's going to turn out. But South Carolina's definitely got, a seat at the table here.
Yeah, for sure, man. These battles like this, you're going to have to fight it out. We all know that. But it's where you want to be. You want to be at the table, and then you take it from there. Another guy that I think completely separate recruitment, Chris. Like I don't like to just lump recruitments together or say, well, because this, then that. But there are weirdly almost some parallels, I feel like, to where things are with Carter Meadows, maybe, and where things are with 4-star cornerback Kari Adams coming in. You're talking about a guy, again, Carter from the DC area. You look at Kari, he's from Maryland. There is some kind of Big Ten / Notre Dame flavor here with Kari Adams as well. Another guy where you're talking about, hey, you can't land these elite guys if you don't swing for the fences in the first place. And, this is a case of definitely swinging for the fences. You're talking about even – I didn't even realize this till I sat right here and looked at it, Chris. Have you looked at the parallels between the rankings between the two guys? So
yeah.
So On3 has Kari Adams 30th overall. 24/7 has him 36th overall. So actually quite a bit of agreement there. Both of them have him as the number 3 cornerback in the entire class. ESPN, push it on back, number 69 in the country. And then Rivals, number 240. So there's actually strangely agreed, like these guys are clustered within the rankings from the various sites to an astounding degree, actually, there. And then you look at the final, the what I call the final, the On3 industry ranking. And let's see, Carter is at 36 and Kari is at 65. And so both guys are 4 stars in kind of that weighted average. And this is a situation, man, where we always see Torian Gray. What do we talk about? He's got his like swing for the fences guys, and then he has his under the radar guys. We'll talk a little bit later on about one of those guys that started under the radar that will be on campus this weekend. But Kari Adams firmly in the swing for the fences category.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the schools there, 2 of them that are also involved with Carter Meadows in Michigan and Penn State. With Kari Adams, you add in Notre Dame, another playoff team, and Oregon. Oh, another playoff team, right, into this mix. And again, an SEC outlier. But this is not one, Wes, and it's kind of funny with all the talk about the SEC and the Big Ten right now, kind of battling for top dog, both of them at the top of the college football world, 1 and 2, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to say. And those are the schools that are battling for the first 2 guys who are 2 of the best prospects in the country overall and at their positions that we're talking about here. So if you're South Carolina, like, yeah, this is the kind of guy you want to be recruiting, and this is the kind of guy you want to be landing. And look, I think like all cards on the table, I think it's going to be a tough get for South Carolina, but you're in the mix, and like you said, just like you said with Carter Meadows, that's where you want to be. You've got to be in the mix, and you got to kind of knock it out of the park this weekend. The Gamecocks are first up. Those other schools that I mentioned are all slated currently to get official visits for Adams. And a couple more interesting little layers to his recruitment. He wants to decide at the end of the month on June 28th. That's what he told On3's Chad Simmons. The school that gets the last official visit right before then is Oregon. And Oregon is Adams' proclaimed, quote unquote, dream school. Now, sometimes, Wes, you and I have been doing this a while. Sometimes you hear dream school and you're like, all right, let me pick another school because he's not going to. There's kind of this like dream school curse. However, if you kind of the information and kind of just reading between the lines, Oregon getting the last OV, they're legitimately in the mix. Like they could actually fit the bill of a quote unquote dream school that actually does land a guy who grew up wanting to play there, right? But I think it could be any of these others as well at the end of the day. So official visits will really tell the story here. I kind of get the sense that South Carolina is not, at the top coming in, but there are 5 schools really primarily in the mix, and they're one of the 5. And that's all you can ask for at this point.
It does kind of make you wonder. It's complete speculation on my part. Did Oregon maybe get yeah, coach, I'm going to give you the last visit. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we see prospects do that. Like, coach, I'm going to take these visits, but I'm coming to you last. Let's finish this thing off then. I just want to enjoy the process. Yeah, no idea if that is the case, but I mean, we've seen that on South Carolina's side. Like, yeah, coach, I do like these other schools, but I love you. I'm going to give you the last shot after I go have my fun. So could be, could not be, but I always look at OV season, man. There's always a guy or two that your program just knocks it out of the park with. And you kind of just – they come in and they're just blown away with what they see, and you make a big push for a guy. So who on this list will that end up being that maybe that fits the category for? I don't know. We'll all find out after this weekend and then in the following months. Let's turn the page, Chris, to a guy that I think South Carolina is in significantly better shape maybe than the first 2 where you're kind of shooting for the stars a little bit. KJ Johnson is a name that has like popped on the radar a few months ago, and then you hear, he wants to visit, highly interested. When South Carolina when Torian Gray offered him, he didn't even have an On3 profile at the time. And, first major offer, they get involved. Since then, you've had Ole Miss, you've had Mississippi State offer him, sent OVs to those schools. You've had Alabama get involved. You've had Arkansas offer. Like this recruitment has turned into an SEC affair for a kid from Alabama who, was well under the radar when South Carolina first offered. So he visits the first time. While on that trip, he's already setting the next visit. While on the second visit, he's already setting the OV. And just a case of South Carolina really getting in there early, getting that relationship started. And, I'm not saying he doesn't like Ole Miss and Mississippi State as well. Clearly he does. But, I think we would both agree that South Carolina enters this weekend in a spot where with no decision date set, though, you would say you're kind of in as good of a place as you can be as the OVs kick off, I think.
Yeah, I think you are. And I think the first offer here, it doesn't always mean something, but I think to KJ Johnson it did. And, he very much – I feel like we say this about every DB prospect. Maybe we'll just start talking about guys if they don't fit the mold of the Torian Gray defensive back tape. But, this is another guy with length, with versatility. Plays at Woodlawn in Birmingham, Alabama, which has actually produced, interestingly, some under-the-radar type guys who have gone on to be big-time college players. Wes, one of them is Chris Davis of Kick 6 fame, played at Woodlawn in Birmingham. Chris Davis, by the way, Wes has a kid who's a 2028 prospect, so we're all getting very old. Yeah, that one hurt a little bit when I heard about that. But nonetheless, KJ, a really good prospect. And I agree with you. Like, I think that's my same read. If you're picking a guy, I think out of this group, jumping ahead a little bit, obviously, where you're like, okay, who's the one guy that you think South Carolina comes out this weekend maybe in the best position for? I think KJ Johnson is probably a safe pick there. But there's also, to your point, still some competition here. You got Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. You got Mississippi State. You got Bama. You got Arkansas and some others involved there. But I think the Gamecocks have laid, and Torian Gray, they've laid a really good groundwork here to where this is a recruitment that you can kind of look ahead and think that this is a good candidate for a guy to end up in the class.
Yeah, for sure. And if that ends up happening, we'll get even deeper into what he brings you as a prospect. But certainly, you know what Chris said earlier. This is your just classic Torian Gray traits guy that you draw up. And I've had several people, hey, is he a corner? Is he a safety? A lot of times, that's a question we ask with the Torian Gray guys. And it doesn't normally necessarily get answered until they're on campus. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if they commit, they sign. Yeah, you can start out at corner, but let's see what happens from there. You could be a corner, you could be a nickel, you could be a safety. From what I've been told, they believe he's a guy who just has the skill set, the measurables, the body type that could end up in any of those spots, which I think we always talk about the value as a prospect, and it kind of just increases your chances to end up playing because you're not just kind of shoehorned into one given position. So not only good for South Carolina, but good for the player himself as well. Let's see. Let's dive into an interesting recruitment, Chris, because of a different reason than we normally talk about. And that would be PJ Dean, O-line prospect, D-line prospect. Originally, like when this name first popped up and we were tracking him early on, he was an offensive lineman, and I didn't even know that was controversial at the time. Now, if you read Chris's preview on Gamecock Central, he's listed as a D-line. Chris, you and I were both at that Charlotte Under Armour camp where he worked out. I feel like we kind of had a revelation when you talked to him. We're like, wait, hold on. It's D-line now? Mm-hmm. Wait, hold on. South Carolina's in your top, was it 2 or 3
2
that he said? Top 2. Battling Georgia, which there's your meme, your narrative, right? Georgia's involved in every defensive line prospect in America. So no surprise there. Copy paste on that. But what did you think talking to PJ and watching him in Charlotte, man? Now he's going to be on campus this weekend, of course.
Yeah, and to rewind a little bit, it was either, I always get my summer camps mixed up. Was it 2 years ago? Was it last year? But we saw PJ Dean at South Carolina's camp working out as an offensive lineman with Lonnie Teasley. And I want to say it was 2 seasons ago because I think he was a freshman and looked good, right? And at the time, he was starting to get a lot of traction. You're like, all right, this is going to be potentially a national level prospect. It seemed like for a time, things got a little more quiet where you're trying to figure out, all right, is South Carolina actually really still in this thing? And then lo and behold, we find out, like you said, Wes, this spring, we go to Charlotte. He's working out as a D lineman. He's fully focused on that. And hey, it's Georgia, South Carolina. Now, to amend that or to update that, not long after he named those 2 as his co-leader, he put Ohio State in the mix. So they're also in there. And all 3 of those schools project right now to get OVs. And I think all of them have a legitimate shot. I know Ohio State, picked up a little bit of buzz later in the spring. Georgia has a family tie in that his brother is Jared Wilson, who just finished up a career at center for Georgia, now moved on to the NFL. He's super familiar with Athens, but he's been on campus at South Carolina too and has a good relationship with the staff. Travian Robertson has been recruiting him also, and obviously fully focused on D-line now, as we've said. So this is another one, Wes, where, Carolina's in there. They have a legitimate shot, but they're also battling Georgia and Ohio State. And you kind of got to see where things go, not only after this weekend, but just how the rest of the summer plays out too.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll definitely be kind of dialed into that one. Another one could go either way. I think that's maybe a trend with a lot of these guys for this weekend, Chris. Like we'll kind of, as the summer goes on, get into there. So there's going to be 3 big weekends. I maybe should have let off at that. 3 big weekends. This is the first of them. There'll be 2 of them later on, all in June. And there'll be some guys in there where you're looking at it more like, all right, can Carolina get to the finish line almost? Like they're in good shape with them. We mentioned, with KJ, they're probably in the best shape with him among these prospects. A bunch of guys that if you just told me, Wes, predict where they're going, I'd really struggle right now to tell you exactly where. I think it's really, really going to depend on these visits. You have, of course, one player already committed to South Carolina. You have one player committed to Florida State. Then you have, again, some of these kind of Big Ten battles that I think are a little bit new to Carolina. Like, I don't know. It's just, I'll say it like this, an interesting group coming in. And another one, let's go ahead and turn the page. So Travis Johnson, 4-star wide receiver. Again, we're talking about kind of just going up the coast and not quite to the DC area, but Oscar Smith High School in Virginia. That's a place that I feel like I've heard about Oscar Smith putting out talent for my entire life following this stuff. Like for literally decades, you've heard about this place putting out talent. And so they have a guy in Travis Johnson. And Chris, you mentioned some family ties earlier, talking about PJ Dean and Georgia. I didn't realize this at all. Hopefully I'm able to share this. I don't think it's a huge deal. But Travis Johnson actually does have a family member, not immediate family member, but has a family member who attended the University of South Carolina. And did you know that?
Now that you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember hearing that. Yep.
So, and this again, a 4-star kid. Rankings, he's a 4-star in all of them, but they are a little bit all over the place for him too. Industry ranking has him as the number 24 receiver in the country, number 160 overall prospect in the country, 6'3", 180. And, another one that maybe came onto our radar a little bit later in terms of, okay, this is a guy to keep an eye on. And some Big Ten flavor here, a little bit of SEC flavor as well. Georgia involved, I think. I mean, I hate to keep giving the people the same verbiage, but I do think this is a little bit of also let's wait and see how this weekend goes.
Yeah, it is. Georgia, Virginia Tech, some Big Ten flavor, like you said, Wes. A guy that's not completely unfamiliar with South Carolina. He was on campus for the Texas A&M upset last year in Williams-Brice. So it's obviously a really good game to be at. Had a pretty good review. That was his first time in Columbia. So if you're kind of looking, like you mentioned him coming on the radar later, like he had been recruited and talking with the staff before that, but he's not one of those guys that you can look back and say, okay, his first visit was 3 years ago. It was last November, I guess, or October, whenever that game was. It was late in the football season. The official visit got scheduled kind of early, right? Like some of these official visits have been booked for maybe a few weeks. Like this one's been on the books for quite a while. So early, Wes, that I'd kind of wondered, to be honest, is that one of those early OVs that ultimately gets scrapped or moved or whatever it may be, but it stuck. And the other interesting thing, the kind of angle to keep in mind, Carolina is taking, it appears, a smaller high school receiver class this year. If it's the right guys, I mean, it might be a couple guys at the end of the day. And a couple of those guys are off the board that South Carolina was recruiting. Weren't the only 2 guys by any means, but Gordon Sellers committed to Clemson. Ryan Mosley just committed to Georgia. Those are a couple guys that they have been pretty far down the road with. So now you look at, okay, well, who else is on the board who are quality players? Travis Johnson would be one of those guys. Again, not the only one, but he's someone that I think we're going to learn a lot more about in terms of where things stand and where they could go after this weekend.
Yeah, for sure, man. So speaking of this weekend, if you were going golfing this weekend, don't you think maybe it'd be a great idea to hit up our friends at Palmetto Golf and Belts?
Yeah, palmettogolfing.com. You could certainly go there. And the cool thing is, if you are a golfer, Brandon's actually working. He's been in the lab. I think I said this last time. He got some prototypes. I would dare say some advanced prototypes. There's some things coming out. But what he has right now, golf towels, golf tees, golf gloves, all customized, and they all have really cool designs. They're extremely well made. You've got the Palmetto designs. You've got the South Carolina Garnet, got a cross design on there. And even if you're not a golfer, if you wear belts like most dudes do, on occasion at least, go check out his needlepoint belts. If you like needlepoint belts, again, the cross design, the Palmetto Tree and Moon, the Garnet, South Carolina flavor, you can get those in his needlepoint belts. They're extremely well made, and they're a lot more affordable than the typical needlepoint belts that you're going to find at some other retailers. So you can go to palmettogolfing.com, Palmetto Golf and Belts, our guy Brandon Cohn, big Gamecock guy, big South Carolina fan, big Gamecock Central longtime supporter. He's on the Insiders Forum all the time, Wes. So go check him out, palmettogolfing.com.
No doubt. Shout out to him. Shout out to all of our great sponsors that make this show possible. And you know what, Chris? Let's go ahead and tell everybody about our friend Andy Luedecke as well from My Perfect Franchise. Go to myperfectfranchise.net for more information. But the short version of it is, if you're sick of your job itself, or maybe you're just kind of looking to diversify, to build wealth, you want kind of like a side gig potentially to upgrade your learning potential, hit up our guy Andy, who is a franchise consultant and a franchise owner. What he does, he helps people find franchises that will fit their skill sets, passions, and financial requirements. So how that works is he's going to get on the phone with you, and y'all are going to go over all those things. Like, what exactly are you looking for? What do you love? Is there a passion that you could turn into income? And frankly, how much money, how much cash do you have to put into this thing? And then what he does as a franchise consultant is he will match you up with franchises that he believes will be a good fit for you. And then he's going to help you every single step of the way, right up until you earn that business, and then even help you if you have questions about running it too. 404-973-9901 is the phone number. Services are 100% free. He is here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership. I've been on a couple of phone calls myself with Andy, and I can tell you, I have never met anyone that has more of a passion for business ownership and what it's like to be a franchisee and everything that goes into that. And seriously, if that's something you've ever just thought about, Andy would, I'm sure, be happy just to talk you through it, even if you don't end up going that direction, just to see if it's something you're interested in. So as always, shout out to Andy, who is a big supporter here on not just our show, but lots of them around the On3 network. And so, all right, Chris, let's start to round out the rest of this OV weekend for the Gamecocks. And a guy that we have talked about for a little while and has shown interest in at least considering other schools other than his committed program, which is Florida State, that is Amari Thomas, the 4-star running back who on 3 industry ranking. Again, man, I don't know if I've seen more guys where the industry disagrees about things. But in this case, normally, or at least for the guys we've been talking about, On 3 and 247 have been in agreement. With Amari, On 3 and Rivals, which will soon be the same thing, are in agreement to an extent. Rivals actually has him as the number 6 running back in the entire country. 24/7 has him as a 3-star, number 25 running back. ESPN has him as a number 44 running back. So quite a bit of disagreement there. What we do know is that he's committed to Florida State. He's from Marianna, Florida, and that there are several other schools that also have his attention right now.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a kid that, as a junior, certainly put up some big numbers. 1,880 yards, a cool 12.3 yards a carry, scored 37 touchdowns. So super productive high school player. And, ended up with an offer list that kind of matched that production. Auburn, Florida, Miami, Ole Miss, a bunch of others. Ultimately committed to FSU back in January. But he has shown interest nonetheless for quite some time in South Carolina. He was on campus this spring. He set actually this official visit back in April, and then it kind of, is it still going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And it is, so it's kind of stayed on the books. He's also going to go to Kansas State. He's going to go to Kentucky. And then he does have an official set to Florida State, as you would expect, the program he's committed to the weekend of June 20th. That's his current slate going into this weekend. And so we know that South Carolina does not have a high school back committed in this class. We know that South Carolina, Markwell Blackwell, the running backs coach, certainly does want a high school back in this class. And so Thomas is, again, not the only guy at this position, but one of the guys that he's zeroed in on. And so can the Gamecocks make some headway this weekend? Can they get him thinking a little bit more about the state of that FSU commitment? I think the door is obviously open, right? When you've got a guy that committed earlier this year and already has a slate of official visits lined up, he's obviously still thinking about it, but can Carolina cast even more doubt on that this weekend? We will see.
Yeah, and he's a guy too, man. This was not an official visit that just popped up out of nowhere. I think sometimes that comes along with some other kind of indicators there. This one, he's been interested in South Carolina for a while. It's not just, well, let me go take a free trip and, have an OV. It's something where he has had that interest for a while. And, that they've got a pretty good story to sell there, I think, too, when you consider no high school running backs really last cycle. And then so far, none for this cycle. And a spot where, man, I would think he'd want to take one or even two from the high school level at that position. And, obviously to this point, that has not happened. So we'll keep a close eye on Amari this weekend and see what that feedback is for him. Let's move on to JB Shabazz, a kid out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And stop me if you heard this before, disagreement among the various recruiting websites, but someone that On3 and Charles Power and this crew have been incredibly high on for some time. Number 56 overall prospect in the country, number 6 offensive tackle in the country. Another traits deal there is an offensive tackle, 6'6", in that 270, 280, 290 range, big kid, can move his feet. And I feel like South Carolina has actually quietly been in the mix with JB for a long time. Maybe hasn't quite surfaced onto the public conversation quite as much, but there's been a lot of offensive linemen during this class that I feel like Carolina has been in the game with. And so it's maybe been hard to track, like, all right, you can't take 10 offensive linemen. Who's actually going to be in the class? JB has kind of steadily, a little bit under the radar, been in the South Carolina mix for a while now.
Yeah, he has. And another one, I go back to camp, and I did go back and confirm this, Wes. It was last summer. Seems like a while back, but he was at camp last summer for South Carolina. And I remember, hearing about him, seeing him. And at that time, I mean, he had some offers. He had Power 4 offers, but he has blown up since that time in terms of the offer list, in terms of the ranking. And this is a guy that's really, I think, traitsy, it might be a good word, at the offensive tackle position, because you pointed out the size, the frame. He can hold more good weight, get big, get stronger, but has a really good frame, and he can move. If you look at his film, he can move his feet, like you said. He can bend. Like, he checks a lot of those boxes when you're trying to project who's someone who can go out there and play tackle and slow down some of these SEC pass rushers, Big Ten type pass rushers that you're going to see. He's one of those guys, I think, at least from a physical trait standpoint. There's a good canvas here to work with. So, like you said, yeah, someone that I feel like if you, even among people who follow recruiting pretty closely, if you're like, name an offensive lineman South Carolina's involved with, they might not spit out JB Shabazz, but he worked out with the staff at camp last summer. He was on campus for the spring game, and he went to at least one game last year too. So this is a guy where, the official visit is not going to be his first look. It's going to be kind of a continuation of this process. And they appear to have, be right there in the mix and right in the game for him.
So let's see. Make sure before I say this that I'm right. That rounds out actually all of the uncommitted / not committed to South Carolina prospects who are going to be on campus. The final guy, he's been at campus multiple times and has been committed way back since like last year, is South Point's Anthony Baxter, interior offensive line prospect. And Chris, based on, I think, everything we know here, very firmly committed. Some guys you're committed, but you're worried about other schools. You're kind of tracking other schools. Seems like the Gamecocks have remained the place for young Anthony Baxter.
Yeah, seems like it, man. And I think it was last May. I think he committed to South Carolina very early, and have not picked up any indications of any type of change there. Obviously, a teammate at South Point of Xavier Currents, another Gamecock commitment out of Rock Hill. So things seem pretty solid. He's the lone commit this weekend. Obviously, other commitments will be taking their OVs, whether it's later this summer, in season, etc. But yeah, that rounds out the list. That's all 8 of them.
So we hope to have as much as we can responses, reactions. What are we hearing? We hope to have all that Sunday, maybe going into Monday. We'll see. As always, it's a little bit reliant on, exactly just how things go and how responsive kids are. But certainly we believe we'll be able to get some of that feedback for you best we can. Somebody asked about, let's see, a couple of things I want to hit for you guys. Maddox, what's up, man? He asked about the wide receiver from Crescent High, and talking about Amari Acker.
Yep.
I believe he's taking an unofficial visit soon.
That's right.
And has started to set some official visits elsewhere, but appears to kind of be on the radar at this point for Carolina, and maybe we'll see where things go from there.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. And he has some other Power 4 offers, like you said, Wes, setting some visits. But I think fair to say a guy South Carolina's intrigued by. He's listed at 6'2". He can run. He's got some track times. He's got some interesting film. And so the last that I'd kind of gathered is he was someone they were going to continue digging in on and probably see in a camp setting this coming month in June, and go from there. And, I mentioned earlier, the wide receiver board has, maybe narrowed some here in the summer. And so there's some guys already on the board. One this weekend with Travis Johnson. You got Samari and Wingo out there from Florida, who's still, I think, scheduled for an OV. Maybe some other guys, but Acker is someone the staff's looking into as potentially an option too. So we'll see where that goes. We'll probably be in a position to learn. Heck, maybe we'll learn more, tonight. We're recording this on Friday. Maybe we'll learn a little bit more tonight. Maybe it's later in the summer during camp, later in the season as he progresses through his senior year. But yeah, definitely a name to watch.
I mean, talk about a banner couple of years in the state for receivers. Like, you're already talking about what they brought in that receiver class, like that's on campus right now with the true freshmen, and then start adding in the typical state of South Carolina under the radar guys that kind of, in Charles Power's words, they always bubble up at various times, and start adding those dudes into here. And, it's a good time. I think Mike Verry's done a fantastic job, as we know, recruiting in-state and out-of-state, but a great time to be targeting the state of South Carolina at that position, just in terms of the talent that is available. and Carolina's done a fantastic job of going out and getting some of those guys. We also had a question on there about Josie Marin, South Carolina softball commitment. Yes, it does appear that she is the first public commitment to Carolina via the transfer portal for softball this offseason. Right-handed pitcher from Mississippi State, veteran, has pitched a lot. And interestingly enough, Chris, I was just reading about her. She's a 4-star transfer according to Softball America's rankings, 3.90 ERA in her career. Now, interestingly enough, the numbers jumped this past season. So seems like she's looking for a fresh start. 6.77 ERA this season in 50 innings. But before that, 2.38 ERA as a freshman, 3.68 ERA as a sophomore. So she, I'm sure, is in a position, and again, I haven't watched her pitch. I'm just speaking from the numbers. Talk about Ashley Chastain Woodard. Talk about a head coach who is a former pitcher at the SEC level. Her, she'll tell you the offense is the other coaches, and I handle the pitching. And so you got to think that Josie is saying, let me go get a fresh start in an up-and-coming program with a head coach who can develop pitchers.
Well, and I think if you're somebody who just and I'm not saying like the stats don't matter when you look at a transfer. If she had a .32 ERA, we'd be going, this is the best pickup in the world, right? So I'm not trying to say that, but if you're only looking at the stats, right? I think out of all the coaches we could be talking about right now, Ashley Chastain Woodard has probably earned for now the benefit of the doubt of being able to develop based on what we've seen, right? For what she did of some young players, some returning players, transfers from Charlotte, from Longwood, from Oklahoma, et cetera, like the team she just put together. I think she's earned probably some trust on that. And so we know that this team needs some additional pieces, whether they end up being starter caliber, depth, like where that ends up, I don't know yet. But we know the portal is going to be an important part of their strategy. And this is the first domino to fall in terms of coming into the program. So we'll see where it goes.
Yes, we shall. And I expect pitcher to certainly be a spot where they, I would imagine, continue to add girls. When you look at replacing Sam Grass and you look at losing a couple of players to the portal, who did pitch this year but didn't necessarily pitch a ton and didn't get those big important innings. And, just maybe trying to add a little bit more to kind of still Beamer's phrasing, a little bit more competitive depth at that position, because I think they probably wanted a little bit more of that this past season as well. So they're not only having to replace a Sam Grass, having to replace those transfers just in a number standpoint, but also you wanted to be, I got the impression, a little bit deeper there anyway than you were this past season. So we will certainly see where all that goes. And that's something we started really covering softball recruiting, softball transfer portal last offseason, and it went really well with our members. Like, we got a lot of traction on it. So we 100% plan to be covering and tracking that again. We've already got some content on the website that will sort of point you to what the positions of needs are, who's out, who can come back, who is coming back, and all that. So make sure you go check that out, as well as coverage from this weekend's big official visit. And let me just say, big official visit weekend does not necessarily mean big commitment weekend. That's always a little bit of a misnomer, I think. And people start say, well, you said it was going to be a big weekend. I think this weekend, other than maybe like a KJ Johnson, this weekend is about putting yourself in position to potentially land some of these guys.
I'm glad you said that before we got off. We maybe should have even led with that. Please don't disappoint you. Don't set expectations and disappoint yourself. Wes, every single one of the uncommitted guys, so 7 of the 8, have other official visits scheduled, right? So it's entirely possible. Yeah, you'd love, if you want all 7 of these guys, you'd love for them to say, guess what? On the way out the door, I'm canceling all my OVs and going to South Carolina. Not realistic. Not going to happen. Not going to happen in 2025. The most likely course is that these guys go out and take at least some of the rest of their official visits. But like you said, it's about the positioning, how this weekend goes, what kind of bar can you set with this for most of these guys. This is going to be their first official visit of the process, right? So it's not about how many guys do you have on Sunday or Monday after the weekend. It's about who signs at the end of the day. And that's the most important thing.
Yep, no doubt. So me and Chris will be back early next week to talk about whatever has happened over the weekend. And, of course, on Gamecock Central throughout the weekend, anything that pops up, we'll have for you there on the Insiders Forum. So, all right, y'all. Y'all have a great weekend. We're going to get out of here. He is Chris. I am Wes. This has been, once again, GC Live, presented by our guy, Clint Hammond, CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797. And, by the way, real quick, though, before we get out of here, complete confirmation, Shane Beamer, as we all knew, but now officially announced, is in the new video game, College Football 26. Not that he was going to be left out, but they Gamecock Football just put out a tweet saying that he's in the game. So hopefully complete with dancing and sunglasses at some point in there. So we'll see. All right, y'all. That's going to do it. He's Chris. I'm Wes.